Pranam and welcome, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, to another episode in our continuing program, Your Miracle Mantra Moment, where we chant 11 minutes of Dhan Dhan Ram Das Guru. And then afterwards, I talk, answer questions, and we see where that leads. So I'll ask you, if you wouldn't mind, just putting your name in the comments section and let us know where you're logging in from. That would be great. And please like the program and share it with friends. That would be great. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about challenge, how we face challenges, and I'm going to talk about that because this Shabad is born out of personal challenge and consciousness transformation. And so if you haven't caught the story of the origin of this Shabad, this mantra from the previous programs, I'll go into a little bit of that story, but also then I want to touch on why is it relevant today and what do we gain by chanting these words. So join me now. And as I've said in the past also, there's two ways you can do this with me. You can simply meditate and listen or chant along if you know the words. Or the second way is you can do it as a meditation where you take your right thumb and you wrap your left hand around it like a fist. And then you take your left fingers up around the back. And you just place it gently at your heart center with your elbows relaxed at your sides. Close your eyes. And again, you can listen silently or you can chant along. And in this practice, it's called the meditation to release fear of the future, which seems appropriate at this time. So please join me, chant along, and then we'll talk. पर ब्रह्म का नाम सबका
Sikhiate Santi Parabrahma Karinama Sakarya Parabrahma Karinama Sakarya Parabrahma Karinama Sakarya Tera antan parvariya atal atal tera antan parvariya Jinni tu senya pankar se par utaya Jinni tu senya pankar se par utaya se par utaya se par Kam krodh moh man kande tun saparvariya Ram nom Kam krodh moh man kande tun saparvariya Tand so ke mera tand hai सच तेरा पैसा गानिया अंध सो तेरा कान है सच तेरा पैसा गानिया सच तेरा पैसा गानिया सच तेरा पैसा जिन सेरिया तिन्ने सवारिया जिन सेरिया तिन्ने नानक को लेना तो है गुर अमृत विचारिया नानक को लेना तो है गुर अमृत विचारिया गुर दिता मन सदारिया गुर दिता मन सदारिया गुर दिता मन सदारिया गुर दिता मन जिन सिया तिन्ने सवारिया जिन सिया तिन्ने सवारिया जिन सिया तिन्ने Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So, welcome to all of you. So happy to see your names in the comment section. And I'm going to call out some of those names. If you have any questions along the way here, feel free to just write it down in the comments. Let's see, I'm going to get that a little closer to me. So we've got some of our favorite people coming back time and time again. Kiran Deepkar, welcome back. And she's posted the Shabad in Gurmukhi there, and also in transliteration. It's a big one, but there, yeah. So just the first part of the transliteration. That's okay. That's helpful. Thank you. And we've got Natalie with us, and Megan from Amsterdam, Shami from Wyoming. Welcome. Good to know you're here. And Gulzan, also regular from North Carolina. Jazz is back from UK. And we have Satnam Singh from Eugene. And Yanina from Spain. Welcome. And Satkriya, yeah, that's she's a regular from Ecuador. Nice to see you again. And Simran Kaur from Toronto. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about the backstory, how it relates to us today. So I think all of us will admit that this is a very challenging time for each of us as individuals and for the human race, really, facing this pandemic. Many of us being self-isolating or by law needing to stay home. So, you know, there's a challenge in that as well. We aren't able to get out to see and do things that we usually do, see friends, see family. And that's difficult. But I will say that this is also a time, for us to reflect. And it gives us a little space to step back from the routine of our lives that has been going on for years or decades, and take a breath, reevaluate, understand, and make some choices. Now, if you've picked up the story of this Shabad, the origin of the story, you may remember that the two people who are credited with writing this Shabad, Dandan Ram Das Guru, their name was, one was Balwand and the other was Sata, and they were musicians. And there aren't any other musicians who have had their compositions included in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib. But Guru Arjan, who put together what we call the Adi Granth before the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib, he valued the words and the lessons embodied in this composition so much that he included it in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib. So coming back to our story, Balwand and Sata, you know, they turned their back on Guru Arjan when he first was just newly had become Guru, and they decided to go somewhere else. And they got caught by their egos. And we often, in yogic terms, we talk about this as a stage of the 5 stages of development, the pads. And we talk about this stage, the 3rd stage, right in the middle. We call it Shaktipad. Different traditions may relate to this a little differently, but in our Kundalini Yoga path, we relate to this as a time when our ego gets challenged, gets confronted. Often we make assumptions and we have expectations. We assume that we have learned and embodied a lot, and that therefore we should command respect, status in our community or in our family, wherever we may look for that. And so if that doesn't arrive in this stage of Shaktipad, then sometimes we can feel arrogant and frustrated, and we may make some choices that are not necessarily in our best interest. There's three ways that we commonly react to this stage of Shaktipat, this challenge to our ego. The first one is that we deny that it is Shaktipat. We deny that it is a challenge to the ego because we are so heavily invested at that time in our ego. And we turn away. We walk away, we run away even, from that challenge, from that situation where we were challenged. We justify. We can say, oh, they're not good enough to know me. They're not good enough to recognize the value that I bring. I know I have this value or that value or this strength or that strength or this wisdom, whatever it may be. And people aren't seeing it, so it's their fault. And therefore, I'm going to go run away and find somewhere else to go where maybe they will recognize my importance. The next choice that sometimes people make is that they also deny the challenge. They deny that they're facing this challenge, but they live in a kind of confusion, neither acknowledging and embracing the challenge, nor denying it and running away, but in a kind of limbo. And people can sit there for a long time, perhaps even a whole lifetime, where they're not able to understand that this is a time to face what's going on in reality, to put aside your fantasy about what you thought was going to happen, how you were going to be elevated, you were going to be the most important person in your field, in your community, in your family, whatever. And when it doesn't happen, then it's easier to deny the situation and reject the situation. And so many people just live in this frustration. They're grumpy. You know people like this, right? Maybe you are people like this. I know I can be that way too sometimes, where the situation isn't what you thought it was going to be, and it just, you get stuck in the mud. And I feel like this current situation for all of us is getting us stuck in the mud a lot. And that's why I brought this topic up today. I just feel like this is an opportunity to look around, what am I feeling? What am I doing? What am I saying? Where am I in relation to where I want to be? Some of us have made an effort to step onto a spiritual path. And if you want to do that on the path of a Sikh, whether you embrace it fully or just some of it, if you really want to understand the path of a Sikh, then, and to drink water from that faucet or that fountain, the path asks that you bow, that you lean forward low and drink from that source. It's a path of humility. It requires that you place your head, as Guru Nanak says, place it in your hands and walk on this path. Joto prem kananaka chao, sirda tali gali mariao. He's talking about that we have to surrender to a certain acceptance of what is and not live in this fantasy that we often hold. And so all of us had lots of expectations 3 months, 4 months ago of where our lives were going to go and what we would be able to do and who we would interact with. And now that hasn't come true. And it can be easy to collapse into that emotional space of anger or frustration. We see it. If we're watching the news, we see people lashing out at these stay-at-home orders. And I feel like that's an expression of this anger and frustration. And I understand it, but it's an adolescent response. It doesn't show maturity, especially for those of us who are attempting to walk on the path of spirituality. This is a confrontation. This is confronting our own self, how we're going to respond during this time. And, whether or not we're going to get caught by our egos and our false expectations and fantasies. Now, the third way that we can respond to this kind of challenge in Shaktipat is to step up, to let go, and be in a level of acceptance of what is. And believe me, I understand that that's hard, Simply saying it doesn't mean it's going to be that way. For me, just to say it to you doesn't mean that I do it all the time, that I triumph over my expectations and, rise into that space of acceptance. I do it sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And so you will find that if that is your goal, if you decide that that's the way you want to be, don't be surprised if there are some times when, you fail. And just like learning to ride a bike, you fall down, you get back on the bike, and you keep going. And that's the path of spirituality, not to be frustrated by failure, but rather to keep going. And there's a meditative approach to that. And the Buddhists have come up with some beautiful teachings around that. This idea of simply chopping wood and carrying water. When the path is frustrating, maybe thinking about it and dwelling on all the frustration doesn't get you anywhere. But finding something to do, some simple task, can be very rewarding, especially if we can do it with our hands. So maybe you can find some time to create something, or do some work in your yard, or if you're confined to your home, clean out that closet. Sometimes a simple task is a great way to just set aside the emotional confrontation that you might be feeling inside. If you can get outside and walk, or hike, run, bicycle, cycle, anything you can do to set aside the emotional confrontation will give you a little space, a little breather. And then ultimately, as you get some space with it, then it becomes a little easier to find the third approach, to be able to embrace what is. And sometimes what is means embracing your own inadequacies. We can be good at some things, but we may not be good at everything. And so acknowledging those weaknesses or those inadequacies, it doesn't have to become a depression. It doesn't have to become a self-judgment, but rather it can become a moment to understand and accept that, I may never realize that goal of climbing Everest. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm still just as good a person if I never succeed in that particular thing. I can still be a wonderful person in all the other things I do. So I'm going to just pause here for a moment and check out your comments. Please, if you have any other questions, just go ahead. So Kirandeep is sharing here. Let me just show you. She says, wow, just as you spoke, I thought of where I plan to be, and I've just realized I have actually done that. Very good. I was thinking or planning a trip to your ashram, meaning where I live is Espanola in New Mexico, United States, but obviously couldn't go. But in a way, I'm there. Oh, that's so sweet that you're there with us. As you have all come here via all the social media events like this one. Well, that's a great recognizing that sometimes what we have is just fine. You know, we don't have to live in feeling a disadvantage or a lack of something. The more we can bring gratitude forward and see the things that are there in our lives, the people, the place, the facilities, the food, even, the more we can appreciate what we have, then less and less of these false expectations sit heavily on us. So I thank you, Kirandeep, for adding that little insight into our discussion. Man Sangeet also says, so true. And Sakriya says, how do you realize you are in Shaktipad? All right, well, I'll just say that sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But if you want to question it, then it's about these kind of questions. Sitting in your daily practice, your meditation practice, start to observe what are the thoughts that are agitating, what are the thoughts that are calming, that flow through you each day, and start to evaluate how you respond to each of those. What is it that's irritating you? If irritation or agitation is something that you notice, and then look at that and start to understand, is that real? All right, so let's say I'm hungry. All right, there's not enough food. That could be a real irritation, a real problem in your life. But if you're agitated because a friend of yours hasn't called you in a week, a month, a year, whatever it is, how much of a role do you play in that? I often tell people that friendship or any relationship, it's really about reaching out. We can have these expectations that so-and-so should reach out to us. Well, I had them over to dinner 5 times. They've never had me over to dinner once. Okay. Well, that's either you accept that in the relationship or you confront it. But, just sitting in silence and blaming doesn't help at all. And it just sits you in this deep bath of mud. So I encourage you to, when you notice those kind of things, ask, is it real? Have I created this? Have I constructed it? Have I even given it a chance to be in acceptance and understanding rather than frustration and anger? And let's see. So Deborah is saying, let me bring that up. To not be steady isn't acceptable. The yearning still calls. It's such a roller coaster. Yeah. Well, Deborah, to not be steady, okay, you can say it's not acceptable. But I have to say that sometimes you have to give yourself a little room, a little leash, to just let off a little steam. If you get a little irritated and not be steady, okay, notice it, do better next time. But it's not worth getting down on ourselves. It's not worth feeling depressed or even frustrated with our own inability to make the changes we think we should.
these things take time, sometimes a lot of time. And we have to love ourselves. Loving ourselves is really the first step in loving anyone. You know, if you can't love yourself, then how can you be yourself? And if you can't be yourself, how can you be in relationship with anyone in a truthful, honest way? So embrace the roller coaster for a while. You know, oh, okay, today was not a good day. All right, let's hope tomorrow I can step into it a little better. I can catch myself a moment before I say something that's not what I want to be saying, doing something that I don't want to be doing. There's a technique of just before you speak, just pause. And just, you know, it can't, it doesn't work if you do it every time in every statement you say with somebody. But when you get into a conversation with someone and you can see it going in a way that, oh, this might be something that could challenge me down the road or could create difficulty down the road, then before you speak, just take a pause, and however long that might be. And even if you have to say to your friend or whoever you're speaking with at that time, you know, I hear what you're saying and I'm not clear about it. So I'd like to take some time to think and then get back to you on that. It's fine. You know, we get so caught up in being immediate in everything. Everything's got to be in the second, you know, and our life has sped up, although more recently it's slowed down a bit, but still, you know, we still have this conditioning to think that everything has to be instantaneous. And if there's a question, I have to answer it instantaneously. Well, maybe not. Maybe you can take some time and reflect a little bit on that. I want to just change the banner here. We've been seeing the same one for a while. And I can change it to that. I want to get to Satnam Singh's comment. It offers a time to do seva and serve others and heal ourselves with an actual or an action daily. And this time is a test, and gratitude for all that comes. Yeah, I think that that's great. And maybe a test doesn't have to be so testing. Just think about that again. Maybe a test doesn't have to be so testing. In other words, yes, coronavirus is a test. For some, maybe more than others. But it necessarily doesn't have to be so heavy. You know, take each day one at a time. Hold in your heart the hope that you will be back with the people you love soon. What soon really means, we don't know, but we just tell ourselves it'll be soon. There will be time again to be with those people. And then the sense of heaviness from this can be lifted a bit. So I encourage you to embrace that view. Let's see. But Satnam Singh's comments about doing seva. So, you know, if you have the ability to get out and do seva, meaning selfless service of others, great. Or maybe there's some way you can get involved in something online to help others. And that's a great way to feel like you're having a positive effect in the world. So Deborah is asking, how many years does this take? How many decades? Is that what you're asking? I know love is the only answer. The ride between freedom and quicksand over and over is exhausting. Yes, frustrated. I hear you, Deborah. Here's the answer. It takes a lifetime or a moment. All right. So some of us will take a lifetime to find their way to this sense of acceptance and love. And others can find it in a moment. What your path will be, I can't say. But I do know that the potential is that it could be there right away. And that is about just how deeply you can be sitting with yourself, both in the time that you're on the mat, sitting down, and the time that you're up moving around in life. That's where it gets challenging. We can often feel very spiritual when we're sitting, meditating. But then as we move through our life, we forget. We lose touch with that center. And so it is a daily practice of reminding yourself to hold on to that consciousness, that vision, that acceptance, that love. Next time you see somebody that is walking by, or and they have caused you difficulty or pain, try a different way of just accepting that is their being, and there is still part of them that we can love. We don't have to just be in agitation with that person. So practice, practice, practice. That's the old story about the man who was walking through New York City, and he was trying to find his way, and he stopped a taxi driver, an old taxi driver, and said, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And the taxi driver said, "Practice, practice, practice." Meaning that, to get to Carnegie Hall would mean to perform there, and to get that good, you have to practice, practice, practice. So that is for us too, humanity, understanding our humanity takes practice. That's why we're here. We're having this human experience to learn how to be loving, insightful, honest human beings. So I think I'm going to wrap it up now. I appreciate all the wonderful comments and questions, and hope you'll come back next week. We have Tuesday and Thursday, the same programs. I wanted to encourage all of you to come and attend tomorrow at the same time. I have a guest joining me for the program Home Kirtan and Chat, and that will also be live. And the guest tomorrow is Tantaran Singh, very well known in Europe, but a wonderful person I've known for decades, and he is a great musician as well. And so we'll be hearing some music from him and talking about that. And so I hope you can join us. And then in 2 weeks, my guest will be Sadhasat Simran Singh, who is a member of Chardi Kala Jata, who plays amazing Gurbani Kirtan. And he will be playing some music and speaking with me next Friday, not tomorrow. All right, well, all blessings to you. May you stay healthy, may you stay safe, and please stay home if you can, and we'll see you soon. Satnam, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.